Roger Stone got 40 months in federal prison, 3 years, 4 months altogether. All right, let's dive into this one together, my friend, shall we? We know that the libs are going to say this is not justice, and not because they think that Roger Stone is innocent or should get any mercy. They really convinced themselves that, he should go to prison for like 7-8 years, federal prison. That's a long time to spend in prison. Think about your own life. Go back in time 8 years and think about everything that's transpired between now and then. You're going to spend all that in a cell for 8 years. I mean, that's what Blagojevich just served, and he is a changed man. That is for sure. He has been through some stuff. Roger Stone going to prison for over 3 years is, in my opinion, which I guess I share with you freely because this is an opinion and analysis show, is really a travesty. I mean, this is a guy who, if it weren't for the frenzy around Russia collusion and the hatred of Trump and all this other crazy stuff, this could have even been deferred prosecution, in my opinion. This could have been that deferred prosecutions. When you go and you meet with the prosecutors, they're like, "Look, we've got you. We know you're guilty, and you're going to sign some stuff, but we're not gonna go forward with this. But if you do anything else, we retain the right to throw this in at you and the other thing that you do." So it's essentially like a warning. And by the way, I think that deferred prosecution for nonviolent offenders should be much more common than it is. For a lot of financial crimes and things like this, I think that, especially, if you don't have a person who can sit in a courtroom and convince you that either he or she or, their counsel convince you that there's a human being who has really been hurt by something that has been done, or the government can't sit down and tell you, no, this was really important and this was really bad, this thing that was done to the government, putting people in prison, you got to wonder, why exactly are we doing that? I mean, you got to ask yourself, what are we doing here? So that's what I would say. Roger Stone, whom I've interviewed before and I think is a very interesting character. And I feel badly, too, because, he's theatrical. And I think he got a little ahead of his skis on this one and didn't realize quite the viciousness of the people that he was dealing with the special counsel prosecutors, who were Democrat operatives. That's what they are. I mean, they came into this not looking for justice, but to destroy Trump and everyone around him. And fortunately for Trump, he didn't do anything, and he's also the president. So they couldn't get him on anything that was a true violation, a true crime. And they couldn't even get him on a real process crime. Thankfully, the president did not testify to them because they would have tried to trip him up on some minor factoid. And we know this. There's no sense of balance. There's no sense of justice between the left and the right anymore on these issues. If you're a Republican and you lie, you go to prison. It's terrible. It's super important, and we should all condemn the person. If you're a Democrat and you lie, was it really a lie? Does it really matter? Do we really need to hear more about this? I think we should just move on, like MoveOn.org, an organization started to get us to just move on past Bill Clinton lying under oath and being impeached and the whole thing. So, that's they play the move on game. Meanwhile, we have to look at this and say, people keep claiming that Trump is an authoritarian, and yet all I see are person after person who signed up to help Trump with his incredibly effective and excellent administration, which is what I would say we have seen for now going into the 4th year of this Trump presidency, that people that went in to do that, they get crushed. They are put through the ringer, bankrupted, put in prison, prosecuted, investigated. All these things happen to them. And Democrat after Democrat, who either separate from Trump-Russia collusion stuff breaks the law, Hillary, or in the course of trying to destroy Trump, broke the law, did things that were unethical, did things that should be punished. We're told, nope, sorry, there's some interpretation of the statute that's not written in the words of the law, but we libs can find some way to, it's in there. It's an implied change to the statute because we say so. I mean, that's what they end up doing. This is what they did with Hillary and the emails. Hillary in the email situation, there's no way that you can believe the word reckless has any meaning when it comes to handling classified information and not think the Secretary of State using a private unsecured email account for classified information storage and transfer is not reckless. Over 100 counts or 100 instances of that. You cannot make, if reckless is a word with meaning, that was reckless. But James Comey assures us that nobody would have been prosecuted under that. I ask you this, who committed a bigger offense? Who put the country at greater risk? Who showed a greater willingness to ignore the gravity of what the government's interests were? A sitting Secretary of State who sets up a private email server, allows for the trafficking of some very highly classified information on that email server, is sending that to other people on their emails, and then tries to cover it up, tries to destroy evidence, smashes hard drives, uses these hard drive wipe programs, all this information should have been under subpoena. And that's what we found out about Hillary Clinton, that this had all happened. You look at Roger Stone. What exactly is lying to Congress, which, I'm sorry, why was James Clapper able to say that there was no mass surveillance going on of Americans? Why is he able to say that? James Clapper legally could have said, when asked by Congress, I cannot discuss that in this venue, and he'd be fine. You're allowed to do that. That's protecting executive branch equities and classified information in a public forum. But are you allowed to lie to Congress because you think that you're doing that other thing? Where does that stop and start? That's what I would want to know. Clapper's not getting prosecuted. Lying to Congress, that's the charge that they're hitting Roger Stone with. And witness tampering. Stone was being an idiot. It was dumb. It was a dumb thing to, first of all, he's an idiot because you never put these things in writing. All right. Not that I'm trying to help you guys with your witness tampering, but you never text someone or DM them anything that could, under any circumstances, be used by a lawyer, a prosecutor against you. Do it over the phone. Now, that wouldn't have saved Blagojevich, but at least you got a chance. If you're typing it out, then you're going to be in a rough spot. But the two-tier justice system at work once again here with the Roger Stone sentencing is troubling, and Democrats like this. They don't feel icky about any of this. They think that, yeah, it's totally fair that Paul Manafort was sentenced to not only a lengthy prison term, but was put in solitary confinement by this judge, Amy Berman Jackson. The same judge overseeing the Roger Stone trial put Manafort in solitary. You see, this is where the swamp is a much more important part of the story than people realize. You have in D.C. some swampy judges, swampy prosecutors, and a swampy jury pool because Washington, D.C. has become a stronghold of the left. It votes 95% Democrat in presidential elections. It's not a place where if you're associated with Trump, you're going to get a fair trial. And anything having to do with the administration, that's where you're going to get this trial. And maybe some of it will be in the Eastern District of Virginia and Alexandria, but you're going to get it in the D.C. federal court. So this judge already showed that there's an animus against Trump by putting Paul Manafort in solitary confinement. That's crazy. That's crazy. We should all be able to recognize that as insane. But she did. She did. They also sent, remember this, the FBI did a no-knock pre-5 a.m. or pre-dawn, I should say, raid on Manafort's house. Same thing that they ended up doing to Roger Stone. Does anyone think that would have happened to any of the Democrats that have been involved? Did anyone show up with long guns to James Comey's house or McCabe's house and say, you're under arrest? Nope. There's a pattern here. They say Trump is the authoritarian, but authoritarians don't allow people in their orbit to get destroyed by the government that the authoritarian is presiding over because the opposition to that authoritarian doesn't like his people. This is like saying, Trump is the king, and he lets all of his courtiers just go, get thrown in the deepest, darkest dungeon by the royal prosecutor. Because that makes no sense, right? If you're the king, if you're so powerful and you get whatever you want, you're not going to allow the people who work for you, who are your close advisors, that you care about, that you like, that you have relations. Now, Stone doesn't really fit in that category, but he's considered a longtime Trump advisor. You're not going to let them get destroyed by the government that you have power over. I mean, the president said that he's the chief law enforcement officer, and there was all this ha 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 from stupid journalists, because journalists are all just concerned with virtue signaling, wokeness, what their Twitter game is like, and what they look like on MSNBC, and that's what it's all about. What other journalists think of them as the prime motivation for what most of their work is. It's not being learned, it's not being particularly insightful, or it's certainly not being wise. It's a vapid, a vapid profession. And the worst are the TV journalists. I mean, they're actually the worst, because most of them are just, I'm just reading off a prompter and I don't know anything. Bunch of idiots. So Roger Stone's going away. I mean, this, under the circumstances, I think I probably said on the show, although I don't want to start saying I've made predictions that I didn't make. There are some other radio hosts who do that. I try to keep it real. I think that I said it would be, I've definitely said to other people that it would be about 3 years. 2 to 3 years sounded about right to me for what the sentence would be. That means he's serving. Remember, there's no parole. He's serving the full sentence. He's going to go away. Unless there's another possibility here, and you all know where I'm going on this one. Who wants to play Pardon Roger Stone? That could be next. And I think that a pardon would be, I think a pardon would send the wrong message. Stone, he what he did was buffoonish and dumb, and this is where being a real human being that cares about other human beings and having a sense of justice matters. I don't think Jussie Smollett, for example, despite all of his vanity and stupidity and duplicity and everything else, all right, people that are like, Jussie Smollett should go to prison for 15 years. Jussie Smollett should, probably have to spend, 2 weeks in county jail and a $100,000 fine, but admit his guilt and apologize publicly. I mean, that's getting to what I think justice would be for the whole thing. Oh, and of course, pay whatever the fees were that were run up by the city of Chicago for the hoax. You should pay that. Maybe spend a week or two in a county lockup, nothing too scary, and have to admit that he's guilty. I mean, that's what I think that's a fair punishment, right? I'm not saying that people shouldn't be punished at all. It's a fair punishment. Roger Stone, if I were in charge of this and I felt like he had to be prosecuted, I would say, okay, look, we're gonna ask for no jail time, but you're gonna have a felony on your record, and don't ever, if you do anything else, we're sending you away, and we're gonna give you the upper end of whatever the guidelines are of that offense, because we're gonna take this into account. That seems to me to be fair. 9 years is crazy. That's just, the fact that was even raised by these prosecutors just goes to show you they're Democrat scalp hunters, and they're trying to take down anybody near Trump. And that was, Attorney General Barr was absolutely correct to rein that in, bring that back a bit. And okay, so three plus years. It's harsh. It's harsh, but it's about what I would have expected under the circumstances. He should get a new trial if he wants one, because the jury foreman is an anti-Trumper. This brings me back to the swamp situation of D.C., where if you're a Trump associate, you can't get a fair trial in the People's Republic of Washington, D.C. You can't. Because everyone in D.C., and this is one thing about that place, I'll say, I'm here in New York City, and I'm on the subway 4 times a day now. So I'm spending a lot of time, out and about in the city, in contact with all kinds of folks. And the thing I like about New York is that, this place is full of libs, but there are some conservatives hiding here and there. It's full of libs, but everyone's just in the hustle, trying to make money to pay the outrageous rents here and feed themselves and their families, and they're focused more on that. In D.C., it's a lot of, what are your politics, sir? It's like the first question people will ask you. It's much more focused on it for obvious reasons. And that also means that people feel very connected to their political affiliation, and if they have the opportunity to be a hero to their peer group by crushing somebody who's even associated with Donald Trump, D.C. natives love to do that. That makes them very happy, very excited. And that's why the foreman on the Roger Stone jury trial is just indicative of a broader problem there. And Stone should get a new trial. But does he want one? Is he really going to get a much better sentence from another judge? Does he want to go through this again? Does he want to go through the expense again? I don't know. But Judge Jackson here just decided to go forward with it. She doesn't care. She's like, yeah, we're going to do the sentencing. We're not even going to look into this Foreman situation. We're just going to go forward. So I think that there's a clear bias. And one of they talk so much on the left about our sacred institutions and our democracy. It's a reminder for us that all this stuff only works. This government we have only works if we can agree on some very basic things like the plain meaning of language, particularly in statutes, but the plain meaning of language, that words do have meaning that we can all understand, that it doesn't change just based upon what someone wants it to be, and that respecting the system means respecting it when outcomes happen that you don't like, and still saying, okay, I didn't get what I wanted, but it stayed within the framework of what our government is supposed to do. Libs have abandoned that. They've abandoned it. Whatever it is, whether it's the Electoral College or Supreme Court judges or you name it, if they're not getting what they want to change the rules or scrap the whole thing and do something else. That's their approach. Something else that I don't want to leave off the table here, my friends. We were told for the last week or so that the Attorney General of the United States should resign. You must resign, sir. We were told that. We were told that he was in Trump's pocket, that he was destroying the office of the Attorney General with his corruption. And yet this judge, who is no friend of Republicans or Trump, well, that's clear. This judge gave a sentence that was right in line with the reduced request from the DOJ. So was Attorney General Barr right all along? Yeah, he was. But what do you think is going to happen now for all the libs out there, all the people in the media who are like, oh, the Attorney General, look how he intervened and he did all this terrible stuff. So what really happened, now that we have the full story, is the Attorney General had people who are his employees at the Department of Justice shift around. Remember, the judge can impose whatever sentence she wants, right? The judge can say it's more, it's less. This judge just happened to give a sentence right in the bullseye of the reduced request from DOJ. Is she a Trump bot too? Is she, or was that realistic? And therefore, the initial request from the Russia collusion deranged prosecutors that asked for 7 to 9 years was outrageous. Now we know the answer. Who looks smarter? Those of us who supported the reduced sentencing request and said that Bill Barr had done nothing wrong? Or the people that are saying, oh, the Republic is in flames because look what they're bailing out another Trump ally. All that noise you heard from people in the media. They're just partisan morons.
I think internet culture can often be very toxic, and whether we are cognizant of it or not, it nearly always concentrates on women, people of color, queer people, and we experience the brunt of it. And I think, I think that to a certain extent, we have to always reject hate, reject vitriol, and denounce that kind of behavior. Also, we also know the amount of anonymous activity that happens on the internet, and that simply is difficult. It is difficult to control when you have like a Twitter handle with a bunch of numbers on it with 2 followers that are lobbying vitriol at you. We don't know where that comes from, but I know that it doesn't.
I think he's done enough to try and stop it.
I think he works very hard. I think we send out messaging emails, and you know what? I've been subject to a lot of this stuff from all sorts of pockets from the internet. ICE and CBP officers targeted me on Facebook for attacks when I went to visit the border.
This is AOC on the Bernie Bros, who have been getting more attention recently because other Democrats are realizing, wow, Bernie has a lot of psychopath supporters, a lot of them. Some of this came out when James O'Keefe did his Project Veritas videos, and you had people talking about rolling out the guillotine and how, we're going to eat the rich, and that was, of course, dismissed as just the rantings of a few unimportant campaign employees, and that really, Bernie is all about love and rejects hate. This is one of the constant Democrat refrains that I find the most troubling because it's so untrue, and yet they believe it. They really think that they are not hateful, even though they will direct at the President of the United States the following accusations that he is, and you know that I'm not exaggerating any of this. This has all been said by prominent voices on the left, not repudiated. People don't shout down other Democrats and other leftists when they say these things. They've called the president a traitor, a white nationalist, a racist, a rapist, demented, like out of his mind. What am I leaving? Oh, of course, corrupt, and I mean, all these other things that are lesser. But when you're calling people things like a traitor and a rapist, and you have no evidence for either of those things, no evidence to a reasonable person for either of those things at all. I mean, if you believe like Sweatnick about Kavanaugh, well, then you'll believe anything, and you're not very bright, and you could believe that, I had dinner with Elvis last night. But people, unfortunately, in this country do believe stuff like that. A lot of Democrats do believe things that are quite obviously false and still think they're very bright and very sophisticated. That's a big part of being a Democrat, is you're sophisticated in your thinking, even though you believe that, Anderson Cooper and Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon and who's that guy? I was going to say Phil Donahue. That's an old talk show. Who's the Irish guy on Stop the Hammering? That guy on Stop the Hammer. He's the guy from Boston. Anyway, he's on MSNBC. I can't remember his name right now. Lawrence O'Donnell. I was going to say Chris O'Donnell. He was in a very bad Batman movie back in the day, for those of you who have seen some of the bad Batman movies. They're almost worth watching just because they're so terrible. The ones that were in between the Michael Keaton era and the Christian Bale era, there were some Batman movies that even they wish they could forget. So they think, I know I got diverted there for a moment. They think that the left thinks that they don't hate people, but they say these things about Trump. And they also say that if you support Trump, you are therefore supporting these things. And so it's fair to say these things about you too. And I mean, I can tell you that liberals love to whine about the mean things said about them on the internet. And they claim that it's because they fall into marginalized groups, whichever specific marginalized group. And I can sit here and tell you that, I mean, the things that far left-wing people write and say to me on the internet are beyond appalling. I mean, it's a combination of disturbing and really sad at the same time. And I don't even get the worst of it because, I mean, I have friends in conservative media who they're numb to all the death threats at this point. And not just death threats against them, but death threats against their families. And people are completely insane. And I think that there should be much more stringent enforcement of, communicating an interstate threat against somebody. And I think that should be something that's taken really seriously. And unfortunately, it's not usually taken very seriously. But for liberals to claim in the current environment that they reject hate, their entire platform right now is really about believing that everyone who supports Trump is hateful. And they don't see how that is in and of itself a hateful position. They don't care that many people that support Trump just wanted an end to politicians talking to us all like we're robots. They don't care that a lot of people who support Trump just think that we should have national sovereignty and a secure border, and the American people, as seen through their legislature that does have laws that say that this is not okay, the American people should have a say in who comes and goes from their country. And the laws are the way that you can enact that, enforcing those laws. Or that you just want a robust economy, or you want someone to stand up to China on trade. No, they tell their followers, the Democrat narrative is that if you support Trump, you are in bed with, effectively, a white nationalist, a neo-Nazi. And they think that there's not going to be really severe long-term consequences from this. They think that they're the ones that reject hate. Here, by the way, is how Bernie Sanders responds. He responded last night on the debate stage about the Bernie bros, who are notorious. I mean, for example, the group on the internet, the Young Turks, some of the worst people that are in media work for that organization, and they're Bernie bros. I mean, they're Bernie people. Some of the nastiest libs you'll come across on Twitter are Bernie people, and I don't think that's an accident. I think it's because Bernie Sanders appeals to envy and a combination of revolutionary sanctimoniousness and revolutionary nihilism. Like, tear it all down because we are the saviors we've been waiting for, and if you get in our way, we'll crush you because we're going to bring about utopia. That's standard socialist thinking stretching back for now over 150 years. They've always thought that anybody who wasn't with the program was an enemy of the class-based warfare that they want to engage in. And that's not really new or different in any way. Bernie Sanders, though, when confronted with this, I thought this was really interesting. Just shows you the depth of some of the delusions that Democrats still hold to, some of the depth of the narrative that they still cling to and believe about Russia collusion. Here is what Bernie said about his Bernie bros being a bunch of psychos that harass people online. Play 12.
Let me say something else about this. Not being too paranoid. All of us remember 2016. And what we remember is efforts by Russians and others to try to interfere in our election and divide us up. I'm not saying that's happening, but it would not shock me. I saw some of those tweets regarding the Culinary Workers Union.
I mean, I'm not saying that the Russians, were pretending to be my supporters, but I'm not saying that.
This is now, though, the end result of the media telling everybody for 3 years in this country that the Russians stole the election, and the Russian hackers are basically hiding under your bed at night. You should be terrified about what the Russians are up to all the time. Russians are stealing our democracy. Russians are doing this. Russians are doing that. Just shocking stuff for a presidential contender to say, but they will continue to say this. They will stick to this script because otherwise they'd have to deal with, is the Democratic Party increasingly embracing hateful politics? I know we're a very polarized, very divisive time, but the people that I know who are Trump supporters, they're strong defenders of Trump, but they want things to continue in this country, or they support things that would be good for all Americans, that would actually be objectively helpful for the American people. I know a lot of libs that think that policies that at least half the country dramatically don't agree with should be rammed down our throat by the force of government because it's the right thing for them to do, they say. That feels a little bit different. And I know that this is all about, where you sit is where you stand, and there are differences here of perspective, and maybe if I were a leftist, I would think that the right was trying to do this. I think that that's just not really seeing what has happened where the Democratic Party, Trump has run a presidency that is largely in line with his style is different, his tone, his messaging, but his actual implementation as president has been well in line with what you would consider to be traditional GOP norms. There's really very little that he's done that is outside. Remember, the Secure Fence Act of, I think it was 2006, was bipartisan. Both parties in Congress said, yeah, we should build a fence. And then they backed off it. Now building a fence makes you, Attila the Hun. Amy Klobuchar doesn't know who that is, by the way. Now doing these things that used to be considered bipartisan, it makes you a terrible person. Well, why is that? It's because the Democratic Party has shifted so far left. Why is James Carville going on TV? I mean, people would say it's because he wants to be relevant. I think Carville's happy, hanging out in New Orleans and doing whatever he's doing down there. But why is he going on TV saying the Democratic Party's lost its mind and Bernie Sanders, as a socialist, should not be president of the United States? Because they've gone nuts as a party. I mean, they've gone far too long in one direction. And so that's now where I think we need to understand countries go through periods where a political party, we did, I'm not saying we're fighting a civil war now or anything like that's going to happen, but we fought a civil war. You look in history, countries where there are political parties and you think it's a vibrant democracy, they can go bad and they can go bad quickly. And some political parties that you wouldn't have thought that you would, if you were a betting man, you wouldn't have said, yeah, they're going to be running the show there. They end up in charge. And maybe the country eventually comes back to some degree of normalcy, but they can go through a very dark, dangerous, destructive period as a result of one party losing its way. I think the Democratic Party has lost its way. I don't think that it's safe for America to be entrusted to these people at all. I think that they are very destructive. And I wanted to share with you, there's a letter, I'll get to it in a few moments, but I think that they've reached a point now where they don't even know how to work with the other side on a lot of this stuff. And the younger end of the Democratic Party, when you look at Bernie supporters and others, the younger end of the Democratic Party is where the most fervor is. Boomers will say what they have to say to be, that's why, Biden and Klobuchar, whoever. They'll say, even though I think Biden is technically, he's pre-boom. Is he? I think he's above the boomer generation age. Whatever. He's not. He's not the greatest generation. What's between boomers and the great? No, I guess boomers come after the greatest generation, so he must be a boomer, but he's an old boomer. But they'll say what they have to say in order to be in good standing with the Democratic Party. The younger end of the political spectrum these days is frightening. And that's why what you see going on with college campuses and what you see happening in much of the media is, I think, a harbinger of things to come, and a very, very troubling one. So I want to talk to you more about what is the youth support of Bernie Sanders and really the youth direction of the American left telling us about what our future is going to be like in this country. Because we are in a new place now. We have not seen this before, certainly since the 1960s.
If the amount of money that you have can force the DNC to change their rules, but the DNC would not change their rules for Cory Booker, Julian Castro, Kamala Harris, that is an actualization of power. And we all know how I feel about billionaires. I don't think that in a place where 60% of Americans can't even, make more than $40,000 a year, that the presence of a billionaire who largely makes their money off of businesses underpaying their workers, like Walmart, like Amazon, like so on, should exist.
She does. She has an economics degree and learned nothing, apparently. She does not understand how business works. I left out that there was a pretty good moment last night when Bloomberg got to say, who else on the stage has started a business? Of all the Democrat candidates, the answer is none of them. They're all just politicians. They're all completely invested in one thing only, the brand of me. I, me, my. That is where those Democrats come down when you look at their background, their experience in the private sector. They think private sector is be in office for 20 years and then have somebody ghostwrite a book about what you did in office for 20 years and go give fancy speeches that somebody else wrote for you at $100,000 a pop. I mean, that's technically the private sector, but it doesn't give you any actual knowledge of how to thrive and operate in the private sector. AOC, I keep saying, we're going to be talking more about the youth of the Democratic Party, or the younger end of it, Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, and millennials. Obviously, I left millennials out. The younger end of the Democratic Party is the more radical end, and we would like to believe that as they pay more taxes and learn more as they get older, they'll become at least more moderate, if not more conservative. I'm not sure, given the way that the structure around them is being set up right now, the left-wing the left-wing takeover of much of corporate culture that has gone on now, and certainly the left-wing takeover of Hollywood and of the news media. They're churning out people that are going to institutions that, I talked to people that went to my college, for example, when it was all male, which was as recently as the 1980s. And there was still it was a liberal place. All colleges are a little bit liberal, whatever. But there was still some sense of traditional values and norms that would come across. There were more professors that would share those feelings. Now these places, colleges, universities, high schools, public schools, they are indoctrination centers for armies of little socialists who mouth platitudes like AOC does that she has no idea. If a business just becomes rich by underpaying its workers, then all businesses would just underpay all their workers. And, no workers would stay with them and they wouldn't make any money. I mean, she has no understanding of wages and what prices are. that prices are set by the market, by individuals making free choices about what they want to do, and that the only information we have to understand where those prices should be are set by the market. Otherwise, it's just people throwing darts at a board with disastrous results. She does not understand that. And what's worse, she doesn't care that she doesn't understand that. And that's why we've gotten to this point where Bernie Sanders is the Democrat frontrunner. That should be deeply troubling to all of us on an intellectual level as well as a political level.